think I can tell immediately that this is a group that's not passionate about this topic, and that we're going to have a really hard time filling up a specific set of time to discuss it with the other members of the advisory.
It's not a whole week. It's not a whole week event where we start on Monday morning and finish on Friday.
I think the time has come that we all recognize and deal with the change management and culture shift needed, that CS is not sustainable if it's not either monetized or driving net dollar retention or NRR or expansion as a combination of that and retention. And I feel like it's a great topic to, address that it's changed, and we got to recognize that change. But organizationally, many CS functions are getting tucked under the CRO umbrella. So it is just a natural evolution of a sustainable CS motion.
No, I know one of the folks on my team is every time we talk about dollars and cents and expansion and influencing opportunities, he says, Dave, I came from support. I was a technical account manager. I don't know what dollars are. What are you talking about?
We just have to pivot the thinking to the latest SaaS definition of account management, and how, again, it's all embodied in that maturity curve. And if they're buying everything up front that they'll ever need from your company, then it is just about adoption. And I think that's critical too. But if they don't have all that you provide to help them achieve those highest ROI levels, then it is our job to at least accelerate that motion.
Those topics, one of the things that jumps to me when you said maturity curve, I thought also of not just the customer maturity curve, where they are in their technology adoption, but then also the internal team. Mm-hmm. Depending on what the initial charter for the CS org is, if they're not up that maturity curve, they're not going to be ready for this unless they were sort of like built that way or high enough up the maturity curve to take it on.
This is a very loaded topic.
For businesses where partners are important, and I don't believe that there's any businesses where partners are not somewhat important, is how do you get them in that motion, which adds a level of complexity.
We just throw another role at it and say you're responsible for driving adoption enablement within partners, right? Isn't that how it's done? I said throw another person at it a bit in jest, because it seems like that's how we start. We just throw another person and see if it works. But I'm sure there has to be a better way than just adding more people.
Right.
Oh, that's a good point what you just said, Dave, here, because I mean, we all have been facing that, right? You say, hey, we're going to do this, and the first answer is, oh, well, we need more people.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's like, it's the standard response. Like it seems that it's almost like a reflex that people don't even think, like, oh, we need more. Not necessarily, because Teresa, you made a very good point, which is to which point the business model doesn't work anymore with CS because you're not monetizing it or putting it in the center of the sales cycle.
That's right.
Suddenly you can't have it anymore because basically you can't. Financially, you put your company in a non-viable position.
We got to get away from this traditional ratio coverage model.
Oh my God, that's me.
It's my nemesis. Like I go to my teams and they're like 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 1 to 15. And therefore, if you add book of business, which is the growth expectation for the year, you're going to have to add that exact ratio of new headcount. And we got to get into this dynamic segmentation world is what I'm calling it, but I'm sure there's a better or different term, where we're putting our humans on the right accounts that are growing through that maturity curve and actually valuing those engagements versus you're looking at that customer, there's no growth potential, they're static. Maybe they're spending even a good amount of money, not considered what scaled success would be, but you're kind of needing to demote them to a lower touch, a digital only experience because they're just not, they're just not worth putting more CSM coverage on.
And when we start to say, this customer is worth 7 million and we are going to have a very light coverage. What do you mean? Is the 7 million ARR? Well, we got it all. We sat down and
they're
sold out. So they have to be kept happy and alive, and no doubt about that.
Exactly.
But I'm putting the resources elsewhere because there is no expansion anymore, and that's a good thing. I mean, so we did a good job. We should be all celebrating, and now the lifetime value is getting up because we're not going to invest a lot, and we're going to at least harvest the margin of all the good work. Totally not very hard conversation to be having.
I think what I've been hearing though is there's two that have sort of been bubbling up.
Yes.
And I think it relates to the maturity concept. How mature are our customers? How mature are we? And what's the charter we were identified to do? And I think we could certainly fill up the time and conversation around that if those two topics are the ones that resonate most with you all.
Yeah, I love it. I think those are good ones, but I think we've given the ecosystem team just even other ideas for other critical topics. I mean, this is what I feel is really top of mind. All that value delivery, all that, we have to transform the way we're thinking of CS because the old method is not sustainable.
I think this topic is of little interest based on the chat and the conversation that's happening here. Really glad that this is striking a chord with so many of you and that we're prompting amazing conversation. Thanks for your participation. There was one that I didn't want to lose, and Bill, I'm going to call out and say there was a comment about sales rep needs to be trusted advisor as well. I'd love to just touch on that for 1 second and then point out that we're getting closer towards the 2/3 mark of the call, and we should probably switch on to the next topic after we do that. So Bill, the floor is yours if you'd like for just a second to talk about this concept of, trusted advisors, sales reps have to have it too. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it really is probably just the concept of a trusted advisor, because sales isn't just going in and taking orders and servicing the account. They have to be very up on that client's business. They have to demonstrate the value of their company, their portfolio of products and services, and how that fits with the client's agenda and how it's going to solve problems. As a client exec, that's what I'm doing day in and day out, is going in and talking to sales leaders, talking to marketing leaders, and bringing solutions to them. So, and you're building trust. You're building trust that you know what you're talking about. You understand the pains that they're dealing with. You take the time, to research their business, their competitors, understand their company strategy. So, trusted. I guess my point is, being a trusted advisor, you're representing your brand, whether you're customer success, whether you're sales. You have to be looked at, for the value you're providing and earning that customer's trust in both roles. So it's just, you get the point. It's not to over communicate it, but
yeah. And Bill, I think it's such an important recognition for two comments and then we'll move on. I love that we get to talk in the language of customer success. I think so many times I have to translate things inside of my company that we just talk a different language. And yes, we can talk about layer and adoption and usage, and not everybody has all of that same vocabulary. So it's always nice to talk about the CS vocabulary. But I think it also does and can get us into trouble as we think about the racy governing interactions, but it's also our language that sets us up to say, well, we're trusted advisors and therefore other people are not. It can be a real challenge that creates friction versus solves things. So thanks for the comment. And then Teresa and Christophe, just to keep us moving along here, is trusted advisor status. What are we going to do? Let's jump in on this one for just a minute.
I think we talked about it quite a bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
That limit of, and I agree totally with you, Bill. We shouldn't call too much CS as a trusted advisor. Everybody has to be a trusted advisor. I think there was I don't want to go back, but it's kind of related to here. I love what Peter, you said in the chat, because that's something that I tried to implement maybe too soon, and so it didn't work as maybe it was too soon. But I love the fact that you're thinking operational success versus strategic success, and that's where also it's different skills, it's different talk, and you kind of imply that CS can take the operational one and sales the other one. I think you're into something here. I don't know if you want to add something, Peter, but that resonated with me that different people for different tasks within the same account. I don't know if you want to. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I thought that was really relevant.
No, I'm good. It's just there's multiple conversations, and I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we kind of group it all into one conversation, right? So there's the adoption conversation, there's the right usage conversation, right? A lot of customers, pick up the tool and then use it improperly, and they say, well, I'm not getting the value. That's one conversation. There's the, executive alignment conversation. So just an observation.
Sure. So back on the question, when do you start to break? I think I don't know if it's the breaking of the trusted advisor, but in my mind, when you start to break is on both ways. One, when the CS person is starting to have really contractual, pure commercial conversation, this is where the customer almost physically is reacting. It's like, oh, okay, I didn't know that you were on that side, and that's confusing. And I think on the other side is when salespeople are trying to get deep into adoption issues, they're usually not really successful because it's not what they do on a daily basis. Same thing on the CS side. If you start having terms and conditions and tariffs conversation, then that doesn't work. And it's the customer is confused. So it's really maintaining that line in hey, when is it that you're dealing with adoption issues, which you shouldn't, because you're going to do something not necessarily good. And on the CS side, it's like, well, don't go into terms and the T's and C's and price conversation. Stay on the value side of the equation. I don't know, Teresa, Dave, if you think along the same line, but that's where I think the line is.
So I was just going to jump in with 2 points. One is I think that's why there's 3 roles here, right? There's the account executive, there's the CSM, and then there's a renewals or an account management team, because that does keep the CSM insulated from too much commercial. But I think the other point I'd make is, and Teresa touched on it, is this idea of simple expansion. If you think about it from the customer's perspective, introducing somebody for something as simple as additional licenses, 3 additional licenses, 10 additional licenses, simple expansion, to go back to the AE is probably not the best customer experience, right? So if you can have that handled by the CSM in a non-commercial way, but in a very customer-centric and service way, I think that's where you keep that CSM insulated by being too commercial.
Yeah, one idea that we did then to address that simple expansion is really created a pretty frictionless self-serve experience so that customers can just go online, we can guide them and show them the first time, they can add seats, they can add products. I get more excited about the conversation around what are you trying to achieve? What are the outcomes? How important for us, we sell CX platforms, is CX in your business? And if that is the gold standard you want to achieve for either B2B or B2C, what all do we have to offer that you might not be leveraging? Maybe that's some of the stuff they have, like we're putting a lot of it in suites. I bet a lot of you are doing the same thing through packaging, but there's a lot of it they may not have. And so distancing ourselves in the CS world from like the products and the price points, just talking about capabilities, I think really tees up a much more natural expansion than I know when I first took this role and we were moved under the CRO, it was all about renewals driving expansion. And I look at it like, if we're waiting until the point of renewal to actually drive an expansion conversation, it feels like wedged in, so think of it over the life cycle when you're really engaging on what do they want to do with their customers and how might we help them? I think that starts to keep CSMs in that trusted advisor or at least less commercial space.
Yeah.
One.
Oh,
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
I was going to say one thing to add potentially is the product complexity that you have. Like, does your CSM focus most of their energies on driving change management, adoption of the product, or is the product simple enough? Like my Zoom CSM has never called on me because I don't think I need their help, right? Like it's simple enough that I can press 5 buttons and get my answers pretty quickly.
Right.
And so in those models, I think like I've seen companies go with the approach of reducing friction in customer experience. I don't want to introduce another account manager who does renewals and expansion. The CSM is perfectly capable of doing it. At the same time, those companies also have a small team of, call it like SWAT renewals reps, who are brought into hairy renewal conversations because those take it's 80-20, like 20% of those cases take up 80% of the time. Don't have your CSM spend time in it. So that is another input that we could all take into this.
Yeah, dimension.
Yeah, and I think for our side, so I work at Procore, we've had a lot of our customer success managers start spinning up like customer success qualified leads. So they're going to the point of recommending solutions based on their knowledge within the account. And Teresa, to your point around the capabilities, but they're not going to the commercial side. And then the reps can come in and it's a little bit more natural that they've had a conversation with the CSM recently in account planning and that we wanted to explore if you're interested in this. It's been really effective, I think, for our sales teams to see how strong of a relationship our CSMs truly have with our customers and how deeply they can get into the capabilities discussion from a discovery perspective to push more expansion revenue. So I think that's been really effective for us as of late.
And Teresa, do you mind if I add something?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's my first session, so thank you guys. I think I really enjoyed the conversation about Sprinkler. And yeah, I like your point, Ashwin, on the depending on the complexity, how disruptive, how immature the market is related to your product, that changes completely the dynamic of what the CSM does. And I like the point that Maurice made in the chat that before we even start talking about breaking the relationship, being a trusted advisor, I feel the CSM needs to earn the right, becoming the trusted advisor first. The way we've been doing that is engaging the CSM on the account plan as early as we can, even on new logos. As obviously it doesn't scale as much as we would like, but that's the idea in terms of culture. And then everyone who's focused on pre-sales really has one goal, is to build a business case that has people, process, technology assessment, feasibility, criticality. That gives us the list of initiatives tied to the C-suite. All that is clean and approved and shared ownership with the account. And when we close the deal, then the CSM is the full only owner of that plan. And then we go from value identification to realization. And what we see once they earn the right, when we've seen that the relationships start to break, is when they lose sight on that specifically. And they're not able to provide support in terms of best practices, because sometimes that discussion is too high level for some CSMs to really understand what we're trying to solve, especially, and I'll be shown on that, where these goals change over time. Especially with COVID, we were focused on, let's say, on a client, on getting them to achieve some market share goals. And then it turned out that now they're all about retention of their current members. So all of a sudden we have to switch, and we don't have I see a lot of companies, this aspect, they don't have the teams that scale enough to help the CSM to reshift and refocus the whole valuation plan, because that's more of a consulting approach that we do pre-sales. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot.
It definitely does. Thanks for adding to the conversation, Jerome. And we're getting closer and closer to the end of the call. We had one final topic that we wanted to touch on. So I think to do it at least a little bit of justice, let's switch to that slide, change topics for a second, and then we'll save a few minutes at the end to close out.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a 5 minutes conversation.
It is not. So with that in mind, Christophe and Teresa, if you can give your perspective of what you're doing, that'd be perfect.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting, because it kind of surprised people when I joined TradeShift. I joined TradeShift, and the CSM were actually carrying a bag, a quota, comprised of mainly renewal bag, yeah, but as well as expansion bag. And I think that was one of the first decision I made, is that to stop that and to turn them into real CSM and having over metrics and not having them on commission plan, but on bonus plan. And the closer that they get to numbers is some of them at the management level carry NRR as a proxy of good job on adoption and expansion, but that's the extent. So it was a surprise, because it was like, well, you're cutting your quota carrying head counts by doing that. And it was yeah, and I do it on purpose, because I want people focusing on the right thing. So in my mind, incentivizing expansion is not by carrying on the CS side, is not by carrying a bag. There's other ways, and that's maybe where you guys can jump in here. But the first thing in my mind is no quota in CS that drives not necessarily good behavior, but happy to be challenged on this.
Yeah, I could weigh in what we're doing at Zendesk. It's the current state and then my vision. The current state is my entire organization, including renewals, is they have a variable comp portion of their package, which is tied to directly the attrition budget, so churn and contraction. And it is intentional that I started there, because I really know that is the number one priority of our organization. And we really had to get some significant progress in that metric. It is the outcome from a business perspective. It is lagging. I get it. I'd love to have an aligned view in our company on the adoption metric that might be more of a leading indicator. So that's kind of on my ideal state list. But what we're marching towards now is moving towards a net revenue retention metric, which allows for the growth in the account and the contraction to be netted out and considered holistically, so that we can look at the account growth, net NRR and DR, however you measure it. The thing about that is important to me is that we never mask what could be happening under the sheets, which is, some serious unhealthy contraction. So we plan to show both factors, the churn and contraction and the expansion. They won't have a quota, Christophe, so I agree with you, but they will have targets against certain team goals, not at the individual level, that will allow them to participate in whether they drove that expansion or not. Everything they're retaining is the base on which that expansion occurs. That's why I think having an NRR goal is probably what we're going to do next. How about anyone else? We have a few minutes.
David at GitLab is saying the same thing, that NR is so it seems that there is an emerging trend on having the CS function incented on NR, and normally in SaaS the sales is much more on the ACV between new customers and expansion. Ashvin is my friend. Ashvin, I've got plenty of friends today in the call. I hope you're doing well, my friend. I see you that you're walking in the street.
Hello.
Hey, you're making us all jealous, Ashvin.
Yeah. What percentage of CSM OT comp is base versus variable? You started at 90-10, 80-20. I'm 70-30 right now, but I think after that it's starting to potentially be too leveraged. I don't know what the rest of the team thinks, but it seems that the limit is around that frontier of 70-30. I don't know what you guys think.
I think it's a great question, Christophe. Is anybody beyond 70-30 today with the CS incentive comp?
I'll comment on that too. So we actually are pretty new with our CSM team, and we started at 70-30, but some of the feedback we're getting from the market is that a lot of companies have moved to 80-20 or a bonus plan. So I think you're right, Christophe, that 70-30 is probably the farthest you can push that for a variable plan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see a lot of 90-10 and 80-20 on the screen, right? That seems to be where we all gravitate towards. With accelerators, yeah. 70-30 here, one. Yeah, so that seems to be relatively consistent. And on the sales side, it's like it's non-negotiable, right? That's a good old 50-50.
Yeah, I would love to hear from Harnish Kanani here, or maybe even David Sakamoto, who are posting it quite a bit in the chat.
Yeah, just I'll share a couple of different ideas. So on the dollar net retention, to Teresa's point, is becoming a very key metric for us. We declared that to Wall Street. They tend to compare us to other SaaS companies in the industry as well. And we had that metric for a large portion of our team last year. I think one of the things with just managing people at net growth is that sometimes, as CSMs can acquire or meet their targets by upselling more than retention, we had a problem. So last year we had net growth, and this year we broke it down into two elements, which is, hey, look, we want to attain a certain retention number, and we want to attain a certain expansion number. And we now have more control to each of the numbers and their ranges. And that's what we comp our people on this year. So I've had to break net growth into its this year.
Yeah, I love that, Harnish. That's you have to hit a certain tier of attrition, budget before you're able to get into that expansion growth mode, because otherwise you're exactly right. You could be making up your unhealthy contraction with just more expansion somewhere else, and that's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, I think this conversation is very much around what I refer to as customer success 1.0 and customer success 2.0. And I kind of line 1.0 as the kind of older school, like we all did, is, hey, we got high CSAT, great, there isn't that, so you're kind of driving adoption in that sense. And the modern success is, yes, we're driving adoption. We want to build those great customer experiences, but there's a commercial spin. So I think what's interesting is we're all trying to find that right balance where they're not, I think most are, they're not going too far into this sales, driving the commercial transaction and conversations. But I do think they need to be comfortable enough at least to be able to tee up renewals and to say, hey, if you renewed today, would you renew? Yet why or not? Why not? So there's that, you want to get close, but at least for us, we want to maintain that trusted advisor and not have them dive into commercial, but they should be setting up renewals. They should be setting up tier upgrades and those kind of things, and have comfort in positioning them, but not actually driving the sales process.
Thanks so much, David and Harnish, for chiming in here. I know we're going to get close to the end of the call, so I want to leave time for a wrap up. Before we do that, I just want to say supreme thank you to Christophe, Teresa, for helping lead the conversation today, bringing their thoughts and perspective to this, and also to all of you for making it such a lively conversation. I've never seen the chat actually this active, so you all did something special today. Appreciate it. Had a great time. And with that, let me turn it over to you, Chad, for closeout.
Yeah, certainly. I can't echo that enough, what Dave just said. Thank you, Teresa and Christophe. Fantastic session. Folks, the chat is on fire. It's just literally just popping. So what I do want to do is I want you to all know that we're going to save the chat because there's some unaddressed questions. We'll follow up. We'll make sure that everybody gets some thoughtful reply to some of the engagement, the tremendous engagement that's applied during this call. So thank you all. It's obviously hitting a nerve. And so one thing I would say before we jump into upcoming events is we definitely want to continue this dialogue. And so for those folks that feel like there's some natural breakout sessions to this topic, feel free to contact me and Dave. Dave Kocher is track chair, and we'll start to work on some more intimate sessions to continue the dialogue on this very fertile topic. Please know that that's our intent in doing so. And then just as we wrap up, we do have some upcoming sessions with IDC, which we're excited by. Please know for all the advisory members, IDC is one of the founding members of this community, and so is Bain. And their research, both companies' research, is world-class on business value, customer sentiment, buyer expectations. So let me know if anybody wants direct access into IDC or Bain on that material. I'm here to help and serve and support. And then also our our friend who is walking the streets of somewhere, Ogden, will be coming up in April to continue. He's a charter member of the advisory ecosystem community, and we'll be talking more on the state of customer success. And I love Dave Sakamoto's point of maybe we're talking about customer success 2.0 and, you know, that commercial lens that we're putting to it. So really healthy topics that are coming up for everybody. Love the interaction. If IDC, because they're charter members, is giving complimentary access to this upcoming event. So anybody that would love to kind of get some more empirical research and understanding of the digital resiliency, please let us know. We'll get you signed up for that and that you have access to it as compliments of ecosystems. We've got some events coming up with other members around outcome and virtual selling, which is in the pipeline for the 24th. And then probably I'll just close on one point, which is please, please, please note, everybody here has access to the ecosystem platform complimentary for value selling, value realization, value capture. So if you don't, many of you are already activated and kind of underway. If you don't, or you'd like to get more understanding of what that means and how it can apply, please let Kocher know and we'll make sure we follow up. Phenomenal session, loved it, loved the energy, loved the chat. Wish everyone a great rest of their week and we'll get after it. Take care all.